Coming up on Bridge City News, Premier Jason Kenney makes a visit to Lethbridge for a big announcement. Plus, could the coronavirus pandemic spark more home firework injuries? And infectious disease experts say COVID-19 cases could grow to 100,000 per day south of the border.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. Southern Alberta's agri-food industry is getting a financial boost. Premier Jason Kenney was in Lethbridge today and was joined by Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Devin Dreeshen, for a big announcement at Exhibition Park this afternoon.
I am very pleased to announce a $27.8 million contribution to the redevelopment of Lethbridge's Exhibition Park to become a world-class agri-food hub, a real engine of the future of Alberta's agriculture industry.
This investment that has been announced today will create an opportunity to attract even more national and international events to Southern Alberta. And investing in the agri-food hub will accelerate the area's recovery, attract even more investment, and create more jobs. And expanding the exhibition park and the development of an agri-food hub will further the ongoing work to Canada's premier food corridor.
It's here that the community gathers. It's here that tens of thousands of people come together at whip-up days and other major events. It's here that thousands of exhibitors come for big trade shows, and they'll be able to expand that massively and enjoy the Lethbridge experience.
This comes following Kenney's big announcement yesterday when he detailed Alberta's economic recovery plan for the next 3 years, including pumping $10 billion into infrastructure and the creation of 50,000 jobs this year. According to the Kenney government, these actions aim to create the greatest number of immediate benefits and future opportunities for Alberta's workers and new investors. Meantime, Alberta's opposition leader says that the $10 billion will help only as a short-term shock absorber. NDP leader Rachel Notley says the corporate income tax cut that Premier Jason Kenney also announced yesterday won't help, saying a tax cut didn't bring back jobs before the pandemic and won't bring them back after. Kenney announced an immediate $10 billion will be spent on a range of infrastructure projects, including roads, healthcare facilities, and schools to create construction jobs to rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic. But Ken Cobley of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce says that the announcement delivers crucial aid. To help support Alberta's recovery plan, the province is implementing the 8% job creation tax cut on July 1st, a year and a half sooner than promised. By bringing in a lower corporate tax rate, the United Conservatives say they're helping companies get back on their feet because of COVID-19, and that this will help ensure that Alberta has the most competitive rate in Canada and lower than most U.S. states, and will be able to attract more head offices to Alberta. The downtown BRZ released a new video highlighting and showcasing the vast parts of downtown Lethbridge to visitors. Now that there are businesses that have had to close their doors permanently because of the novel coronavirus, the mayor of Lethbridge, Chris Spearman, is hopeful that other businesses in Lethbridge will be able to begin to recover soon.
The big news is, of course, Average Joe's, a place that many people have been to over the last 10 years and more. Great people attending concerts, great sports, those to see. They're basically an institution in the downtown, and it's a sad story to hear. And we know it's challenging for entrepreneurs at the moment.
Spearman says the downtown BRZ is encouraging people to come to downtown Lethbridge to experience everything that it has to offer now that businesses have started to reopen. Yesterday, City Council announced that they've ratified the appointment of Shaheen Medizadeh as Lethbridge's new Chief of Police. With over 30 years of experience with the RCMP, Medizadeh beat out more than 20 other candidates for the position. He spoke with BCN via phone today about what he wants to bring to the city of Lethbridge.
The biggest thing that I want to bring to the city is obviously a collaborative way of providing the services that the police department has to provide. And by that I mean obviously extensive community engagement, looking at different stakeholders, others, partners that can work with the police, and also equally important to make sure that employees are engaged and have a say in how things should be done. And also I have experience having worked in many different provinces and locations. I'm able to bring some of those best practices, hopefully if they're not already being implemented, to at least bring those ideas to the table to see if we can implement them.
What goes hand in hand with Canada Day? Fireworks and big gatherings. And with all of us being told to contain these celebrations to our backyards, you might see some fireworks shooting off from your neighbors' properties. But as Fire Prevention Officer Troy Hicks explains, your neighbors could wind up with a fine.
We won't be enjoying the normal fireworks festivities at Henderson Lake like we always do. We need to remind the residents of the City of Lethbridge that fireworks are illegal according to a bylaw here in the City of Lethbridge. You cannot purchase, shoot off, or sell fireworks here in the City of Lethbridge unless you are a licensed business that gets a permit from the City of Lethbridge Fire Department to use these. We just remind people that fire pits are allowed here in the City of Lethbridge. There is still a fire ban on, even with the weather we're having today, and that is for the fire pits that are down in the river bottom. It's twofold for that. We can have a lot of moisture here in the City of Lethbridge, and within a couple days of dry heat, the numbers are back up that we have to put a fire ban on. And we also put that fire ban in place to help with the COVID restrictions of keeping people social distance.
Although fireworks are illegal in Lethbridge and many other parts of southern Alberta, they are legal in communities like Fort Macleod. This has sparked concern that the coronavirus pandemic could fuel home firework injuries, particularly in the U.S., where there were a number of firework-related deaths last year.
Look, clearly everyone's bored out of their mind by the shelter in place. We've been hearing the fireworks here in San Francisco for at least a month. And from what I'm reading, the amount of fireworks usage is double this year what it's been in previous years. And that totally tracks. Bored people with fireworks are going to light those fireworks. A firework is effectively a controlled detonation. And on Mythbusters, we repeatedly were astounded by how quickly these chemical reactions could get way past you.
Yeah, we saw upwards of 10,000 reports last year from emergency rooms nationwide. Anything from burns to tragedies. We had 12 deaths last year. Now, the deaths, of course, were some extreme circumstances that you would think people should know, but you shouldn't be shooting off any fireworks from the top of your head or from your chest. And certainly alcohol and fireworks do not mix.
It's not about how epic this is going to be. It's, oh man, is someone going to have to drive me to the emergency room? Or am I going to spend the rest of my life with an eye patch? I also appreciate, right, that CPSC isn't interested in saying, don't do this. They understand people are going to do it. They're just hoping to get people to layer in that extra step to do it safely. You can give a kid a knife if you teach them the rules. Point it away from you. Never force. Keep it sharp. As long as you do that, you will be okay. Same thing here. Supervise the kids closely. Light things one at a time. That's a huge one. The law of unintended consequences won't apply if you're doing things one at a time. Keep a bucket of water handy.
Today marked the grand opening of Fort Whoop-Up to the public. The fort was closed due to COVID-19 for over 3 months. As Micah Quinn explains, there will be new rules and interactive exhibits when visitors come down to explore.
Fort Whoop-Up is now reopening their doors to the public after being temporarily closed since March.
We are opening Fort Whoop-Up for our 2020 season. We are incredibly thrilled to be able to welcome visitors back to the fort because a month or so ago, we didn't think that that would happen. It has provided us with a unique opportunity in which to enhance our visitor experience here at the fort for visitors.
The fort is only allowing 10 customers per time slot to ensure safe social distancing and making sure everyone has as good of a time as possible while making sure they are staying safe.
They'll be able to ask interpreters questions about the fort, who lived here, who worked here, as well as the kind of work that actually went on in the 1880s in the fort.
Martins says it's important for the fort to be reopened for regional and provincial visitors, especially with Canada Day coming up tomorrow. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. The People's Gathering will take place on Canada Day tomorrow in Moses Lake. The event is meant to support the Black Lives Matter movement and show support for First Nations and people of color who have experienced racial inequality. The group Idle No More is heading up the day's activities, and they are hoping to teach more about the history of the Blackfoot people and educate people about the history of the First Nations group.
You'll be taught some Blackfoot language. You'll be learning some Blackfoot history. You'll be learning a lot about the Blackfoot peoples tomorrow, as opposed to, you know, what we're going through, what the negative aspects. So what we're going to be bringing out is the positive aspects, despite all the systemic racism that's around us. So tomorrow will be a lot more of that, where we can get people to understand more. And the biggest thing about that is education. So there'll be a lot of that tomorrow, and awareness of the issues that we all face in all of these communities and how we can help.
The rally starts at 12 p.m. July 1st at the Moccasin Flats Plaza parking lot in Moses Lake. All are welcome. Red Deer RCMP continues searching for suspects involved in a shooting yesterday morning at Parkland Mall in Red Deer. The vehicle they were driving was located last evening in Calgary and was seized by Calgary Police Service. The suspects remain at large. The shooting appears to be targeted and was not random. One man was injured and was transported to hospital. No word on the condition of the victim. As of today, 7,400 Albertans have recovered from COVID-19. Alberta Health has conducted 7,200 new tests since yesterday and have identified 41 new cases. 41 people are currently in hospital and 9 are in ICU.
However, we are watching closely those cases. Also today, we are listing new outbreaks linked to 4 restaurants in Edmonton: the Greta Bar, Earl's Tin Palace, The Pint, and Local on Jasper Ave. Alberta Health Services is working closely with operators to facilitate testing and ensure all necessary steps are taken to protect public health.
Meanwhile, Canada as a whole is closing in on 8,600 COVID-19 deaths. As of late this morning, there were 104,143 confirmed cases across the country. And starting July 7th, face coverings will be mandatory in all public indoor settings in Toronto. City Council approved the temporary bylaws this afternoon on the recommendation of the city's medical officer of health to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Dr. Eileen Davila will review the need for the bylaw on a monthly basis. Mayor John Tory says the temporary bylaw does not affect social gatherings but will apply to public spaces, including stores and other businesses. Alberta Health Services is testing old swabs to try to find out whether people who thought they were sick with the flu in the winter could have actually had COVID-19. The health authority says that it's checking 21,000 archived respiratory samples collected between December 1st and early March. They say the test for COVID-19 wasn't available when most of the swabs were taken, so they are now being checked to determine whether the virus could have been in the province sooner. Alberta's first case was detected on March 5th. Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says COVID-19 cases could grow to 100,000 per day if Americans don't start following public health recommendations.
I'm very concerned, and I'm not satisfied with what's going on because we're going in the wrong direction if you look at the curves of the new cases. So we've really got to do something about that, and we need to do it quickly. Short answer to your question is that clearly we are not in total control right now. We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around, and so I am very concerned. And just look at some of the film clips that you've seen of people congregating, often without masks, of being in crowds, and jumping over and avoiding and not paying attention to the guidelines that we very carefully put out, we're going to continue to be in a lot of trouble.
Well, just like nearly every other business or organization, churches have been vastly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. But has there been lasting effects from this? Is it possible that fear has overtaken some people, causing them to stay away from church even after restrictions have been lifted? We spoke with Pastor Rowan Crown from Amazing Grace Community Church here in Lethbridge, and he had this to say.
This time for us as the church, we can complain, oh, we can't meet together. It's not, you know, the government's not treating us like restaurants or Home Depot or whatever. You know, you heard those comments, but really the church can still be the church regardless of whether we gather at a building or not. And so we just found ways, or God really opened up ways in which we could still be the church without having to meet together. And that was really cool.
Catch that entire interview with Rowan Crown coming up later in our show. Canada is about to have its first Muslim lieutenant governor. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has named business owner and philanthropist Selma Lakhani as Alberta's new lieutenant governor. Born in Uganda and holding an honors degree in clinical biochemistry from the University of Manchester, Lakhani has been long recognized for her work in philanthropy in a range of fields, including healthcare and human rights. She replaces Lois Mitchell as the Queen's representative in the province. The Prime Minister is touting 3 key aspects of the new North American trade deal that takes effect tomorrow. He says it will protect intellectual property, provide security for auto manufacturers, and give investors preferred access to the U.S. market for years to come. Trudeau is cautioning the U.S. against imposing threatened 10% tariffs on Canadian exports of aluminum, noting that it's needed to meet demand south of the border. It looks like we could be seeing a change in the weather for Canada Day after all. I'll have those details coming up for you right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here's a look at our weather for Lethbridge this evening and into tomorrow. Well, we had tons of rain today. We had about 10 to 15 millimeters to be exact. And that rain is going to continue into this evening, where we will see those periods of rain ending tonight, and then it's going to clear up. The overnight low tonight, 8 degrees. And into tomorrow, Canada Day, it looks like it is going to be sunny for our Canada Day holiday, which is great news. 17 degrees is the high tomorrow. And then for our Canada Day evening, 9 degrees is the overnight low. Not too bad. So as we look further into the week there, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, lots of sunshine. 21 degrees is the high for Thursday, 25 for Friday, and 23 for Saturday. Not a bad looking weekend. 26 it's going to rise to Sunday there with a mix of sun and cloud. Mix of sun and cloud also expected for Monday with a high of 25 degrees. So I will definitely take those temperatures. 24 degrees is the average high for this time of year, and 10 is the low for the averages. 36 was the high temperature back in 1944 on this day, and our chilliest was 5 degrees. That was in 1968. The sun rose this morning just before 5:30, right at 5:28 a.m., and 9:43 is our sunset this evening. Now let's take a look at what Canada Day is going to look like for the rest of the nation here. Victoria and Vancouver, we're going to be seeing increasing cloud there in Victoria with a mix of sun and cloud. 19 degrees is their high. Lots of wind, though, in the Juan de Fuca Straits, as always. 20 degrees is the high for Vancouver with periods of rain. Now, Calgary and Edmonton are actually going to have worse weather than we're having here in Lethbridge. They could see periods of rain and then getting up to some thunderstorms in the afternoon. Saskatoon, some rain there expected. 23 the high, 24 for Regina, 27 the high over in Winnipeg, and they both could see rain tomorrow as well. Now, Toronto's high, 29 degrees under sunny skies. Could see a chance of thunderstorms in Ottawa tomorrow with a high of 30 degrees, 29 rather, the high over in Montreal with a lots of sunshine there. Now over in Atlantic Canada, we're going to see periods of rain here as well. 25 the high for Fredericton, 24 for Charlottetown, and also a nice 25 there for Halifax. Once the rain clears up, they could see a mix of sun and cloud. Periods of rain also expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a high of 23 degrees. There you go. That is your Canada Day weather forecast. The economy shrank by a record 11.6% in April, but Stats Canada says its initial flash estimate points to growth of 3% in May. Manufacturing was down 22.5% in April as many factories either shut down or greatly reduced capacity due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The move hit the automotive sector hard as the output of motor vehicles plunged 97.7%. Food manufacturing dropped 12.8% as outbreaks at meat processing plants forced them to shut down. The managing director of McDonald's Switzerland has been named as the next president and chief executive of McDonald's Canada. Jacques Mignot will take over on August the 1st from John Betts, who is retiring. Betts held numerous roles at McDonald's in the U.S. before taking the top Canadian job at the chain in 2008. During his tenure, McDonald's launched its McCafe brand and introduced the all-day breakfast. Cineplex has announced it's reopening some theaters in 6 provinces this weekend. The announcement comes one day after Canada's largest movie chain reported a $178.4 million loss in the first quarter as it struggles with the fallout of COVID-19. Cineplex has also vowed to sue UK-based chain Cineworld for calling off a $2.8 billion takeover of the company. The Toronto-based company says reopenings are planned starting Friday in BC, Saskatchewan, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador. And now here's a look at what's happening in our markets.
The TSX was up $125.50 to 15,515. The Dow was up $217 to 25,812. The S&P 500 was up 47 to 3,100. The Nasdaq was up 184 to 10,058. Oil was up 12 cents to $39.82 per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to $1.76. Gold was unchanged at $1,780 an ounce. Silver was unchanged at $18.21 an ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton. Barley is at $240. Canola is at $478, and corn is at $233 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $96.28. Feeder cattle were down 65 cents to $132.85. Lean hogs were up 50 cents to $49.03. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 73.65 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Premier Jason Kenney announced a $27.8 million investment into the expansion and redevelopment of Exhibition Park. 400 construction jobs will be created in the project. And coming up in the second half of our show, we speak with a Lethbridge pastor who tells us how churches have fared during the COVID-19 crisis. That is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us. What lasting effects will the COVID-19 pandemic have on the church? Has fear overtaken some believers, causing them to stay away from churches even after restrictions have been lifted? Joining us today to talk about these timely issues is Rowan Crown, pastor of Amazing Grace Community Church here in Lethbridge. Rowan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Jeanette.
Yeah,
really
it's lovely to meet you too.
Yes.
My understanding is you've been here many times, but I haven't had the opportunity to meet you yet.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's great. So your church has not quite opened to the public yet, but I understand that you will be doing so soon, right?
Yeah, so this Sunday we're going to hopefully open up to the public.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing pre-recorded services up until this time, and the main reason we haven't is because we didn't have the equipment to live stream, and so we wanted to have the option, if people weren't comfortable yet coming, that they could watch the service live, and people who could come in based upon the restrictions given to us by Alberta Health Services.
Right. So you were doing church online?
Yes, we were doing pre-recorded services. So it looked a little different, recording midweek and then producing something for Sunday morning.
I see. Yeah. So what was the response from your members?
Yeah, I think overall it was a good response. Probably one of the good things that happened as a result of this was because of our connections in the community, people were actually checking us out online. And I was getting a fair few comments from people. Thank you for putting your services online. People who had never walked into our church before. My family's in Australia as well, so it was actually a joy for them to, they were watching my services over in Australia. So that was good too. So I think there's been some positives come out of this, and I think the other positive is because we lacked the equipment to be able to live stream, someone made a very healthy donation to us in order to get the equipment to be able to do that. So I think there's a blessing that's come out of this for sure. Yeah.
I was wondering too, with more churches going online, if maybe it would attract people who normally wouldn't have the enough bravery or whatever to walk into a church for the first time, right?
I think so. I think it gives a little bit of window into the church, right? And lets them check out a church before they actually go in. So I think that's a blessing that's a part of this.
Yeah. Do you think that it's an effective alternative to meeting in person?
Yeah, I think it is an effective alternative. Okay. I think the people who commented to me that they were looking at our services, they already knew me. Some people hadn't, so I think that's a good thing too. It just shows that because you have a relationship with someone, that then they can make that connection as well. So hopefully it leads towards maybe them going, hey, this is a place I could go and check out church, so to speak. So.
Right, exactly. Now, Pastor Rowan, during these times of uncertainty, many have gone through all kinds of roller coaster emotions, right? Some have lost loved ones, some people have had business fails, some people have lost their jobs. So what can we learn in these trying times?
Yeah, I think it's been a very, very difficult time. We've had people who have lost loved ones to COVID. In fact, right before COVID hit, my wife, her mom died of pancreatic cancer. Yeah. And during the midst of it, it just made it even more difficult, right? To know how to go alongside people, because they're not only dealing with grief, but they're also dealing with this thing that we've never dealt with before, right? So it put people in a very weird, not weird, a different situation. Sure. So talking to them and counseling them and encouraging them. On top of that, I'm also dealing with it, right?
Yes.
And I would say there were periods that I went through some anxious times in my own life.
Wow.
Right? Never experiencing that before.
Of course.
Right? And I think that has a lot to do with the changes in our world and how we adjusted during that time period.
That must have helped really shape your messages too, because we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it was really hard to. For me, I'm very much a people person. So to not have people around when you're doing your messages, it made it more difficult. Yeah. It didn't make it as real at times. Sure. But I really prayed that, hey, when we recorded, let's make this look like church as much as we can, for my own sake as well as the people listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as this pandemic continues with restrictions slowly being lifted, how has this time affected or challenged you as a pastor? I mean, we've been talking about that a little bit already.
Yeah, so personally, there were some challenges I faced, just in my own thought process and my own relationship with God, right? I think that was good. I think it helped me reflect on what is the very purpose of the church. See, we struggled with, we can't meet as a church. But is that the only definition of the church? it really made me examine what is the role of the church in the world, right? We can still be the church without having to meet together. Right. And I think that was one of the big things that really encouraged me, that I looked at scriptures like Acts chapter 16, Paul and Silas. It says they were in the inner stocks of the prison. You know, talk about quarantine, talking about isolated. Yeah, what did? They didn't moan and complain, oh, we can't go to church. They worshiped God. Right there, they praised God and worshiped God. And as a result, their chains were lifted, and everyone in the prison, their chains was lifted. So their circumstances didn't stop them praising and worshiping God. And so I think this time for us as the church, we can complain, oh, we can't meet together. It's not, the government's not treating us like restaurants or Home Depot or whatever. Right. You heard those comments, but really the church can still be the church regardless of whether we gather at a building or not. And so we just found ways, or God really opened up ways in which we could still be the church without having to meet together. And that was really cool. And to see how that really impacted people's lives around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone's going through this together, right? And we're all facing fears and anxieties and different challenges. So fear and trials in life seem to sometimes reveal who we really are as people, right? So is this a good thing, in your opinion?
I think so. I think anytime that I was actually reading a passage in Isaiah just before I came, anytime God confronts us with challenges, there is a chance for us. We can throw a fist up at God and complain, right? Or we can, healthily submit to God and say, okay, God, what do you want to do in my life during this time, right? And that was hard, right? Because we get used to the same patterns of relationships, of life, of things we do, and that was all upended. And so it's then up to us as believers to, humble ourselves and seek the face of God in the midst of these challenges. Now, that sounds really easy, me saying that, but it wasn't really easy because I'm stubborn just like every other person in the world, right? So yeah, it was a learning time.
You're human. That's what it is. You're
That's
human.
Right.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the long-term effects of the shutdown of the church? Will there be long-term effects, do you think?
I joke with people when we start meeting up, publicly again, who's going to show up, we don't know, right? Because you also have people who are in different ideas of when they're going to meet and when they're not going to meet, right?
That's true.
Right? So you've got to be sensitive.
So some people think it's too soon.
Some people may think it's too soon.
Some people are like, should have been done long ago.
Yeah. So you've got to be respectful for that, right? Because we're not just dealing with some thought or some idea that everyone has that same feeling about this. You got people who have range of feelings. So you got to be careful, right? Number one, you've got to respect. I really believe you've got to respect our government and what they've laid down. We've got to be a good witness to those around us. And number three, we've got to be careful that we don't make the minors the majors and the majors the minors, right? And that's in my own life too. So when we open up Sunday, if we have 5 people show up, right? Hey, we get to worship God with 5 people, right? That's okay, right? And realizing that we can trust in God through this process.
Yeah, well, that's a really positive takeaway too. I was going to just ask you if you've seen any positive takeaways from this whole time of lockdown.
Yeah, I think there's been some positive takeaways. I really believe, Jeanette, that we live in a time that God is trying to engage his people. And the way we feel like, or the way we've done engagement with God, God's saying, listen, I want to wake you up, right? The way you've been doing things, maybe you're not trusting in me enough. And so I think the positive thing for me is moving forward, how am I going to listen to God? How is our church going to listen to God in the process of this, and really go back to the basics, right? You know, worship and prayer and preaching the gospel, and loving and serving one another, being a community, and allowing the Holy Spirit to work through us in the midst of that. It's a challenge, but I think it's encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Now, how can the church help those who might be overcome with fear? There's a lot of fear going on these days for both believers and non-believers alike.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our job, and I've been studying the scriptures, and especially the life of Jesus, and Jesus was a listener. If you look at what he did and how he reached out to people, he met the woman at the well. He listened, right? You know, and I think we've got to learn to be better listeners of people. I've got to learn to be better. I think more with my mouth than anything, and I've got to learn to use those ears more effectively and listen to people's fears, and let them take the time to reveal those things to me, and pray with them, encourage them, you know, journey with them through those fears. And that's what I've been praying as we move forward through this, that I do that better. So
yeah. What do the scriptures say about fear? I know there's a lot in there.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, right? You know, that's a healthy fear, right? You know, Philippians talks about do not be anxious, right? You know, but with prayer and supplications,
good one for these days.
right? You know, make your requests known to God, right? So I think there's a lot of ways in which we can respond to healthy fear. And I think the healthy fear is, okay, you know, God's in control, God is sovereign, and we can trust in him. I remember sitting at the beach in Florida when all this COVID happened, because that's where my in-laws lived, and I remember seeing the sun rising, because my kids and my nieces wanted to see the sunrise. And I remember taking a picture right at the beginning of COVID and posting on my Facebook. It's awesome to know that God's in control, right? Right there, you know, God knows what we're going through. So that can help alleviate our fears. At the same time, opening up to people, reach out, right? Don't hide in a way that you're not willing to really get the help you need during this time. So so there's lots of different ways, and get people praying for you.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any favorite verses that have helped you overcome these times of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think Philippians 4. You know, do not be anxious for anything. I think for me, I've been reading this book. It's called The Valley of Vision, and it's actually prayers written by the Puritans. And I've been reading that most mornings, and just having a solid prayer life. And even they use a lot of scriptures, various scriptures, to pray to God, and sometimes in our anxiety and our fear, we don't know what to pray. And just to be able to sit and pray those prayers and take the time to listen to God, that has really helped me. Going to the Psalms is another way in which I can experience. I actually did a series through Psalm 119, the longest psalm in the Bible, where I just shared my thoughts about what God's communicating to us through that psalm. And that was helpful for me. And I kept on doing it. I don't know how many people were watching it, but it was really helpful to me to know that the covenant-keeping God is steadfast in his love and faithfulness to us as his people. So
that was Rowan Crown, lead pastor of Amazing Grace Community Church here in Lethbridge. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Abortion is a topic that stirs up passion on both sides of the debate. It seems, however, that the pro-life side of the conversation is not being welcomed in the public square. Joining me now in studio today is Ruth Shaw. She's the Executive Director of National Campus Life Network in Ottawa, and we're going to discuss this very hot-button topic of abortion. Ruth, welcome to BCN.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me about your organization, NCLN. What is it all about?
Yeah, so we're a youth organization, an anti-abortion organization that works to persuade young people to reject abortion. So young people in Canada are the ones having the most abortions, and so we believe if we want to see an end to that, we need to address the demographic having them. And so the way that we do that is by localizing onto university campuses, where we mentor, train, and mobilize campus pro-life clubs to bring the anti-abortion message to campus.
Now, you believe that Canada, Ruth, will one day be abortion-free? How is that possible in a country like ours?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen in a short amount of time. But if you look at other movements, especially on the left and in any other sphere, where you're able to catalyze people and speak to people and get them to adopt certain life-affirming values through repeated messaging, or through, just constantly bringing the debate and exposing how bad something is, I do believe that at some point in our lifetime, we will see massive amounts of people reject abortion as more and more comes to light as to exactly how bad abortion actually is.
And you believe that young people are truly the catalysts for changing society and our mindset here in Canada? How so?
Well, I mean, to be clear, that can go either way, right? So, in our country right now, the vast majority of young people accept abortion as perfectly permissible. So if you ask the average person, as we do on university campuses, you ask them, what do you think about abortion? And they will say, oh, I'm pro-choice, just totally automatically. It's an automatic response. We've met so many young women who, when they find out they're pregnant, they automatically say, well, I'm going to have an abortion. So you can be a catalyst for change in that way too, by promoting abortion and accepting it and promoting it to your peer group. However, if you're able to convince young people to, and show them the logic and the science that proves that abortion is abhorrent, I think that young people have proven to be the demographic for years and years and years that when they're catalyzed and convicted and mobilized, they will affect great change in our country. And so we're aimed at systematically speaking to young people on a university campus and mobilizing them and giving them opportunities to speak up, just as the pro-choice movement has done with young people, which is one of the reasons that we've seen abortion last for so long in our country.
Ruth, why do you think it is that so many universities are pro-choice and they don't even want the discussion? They're not willing to welcome pro-life voices onto campus? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so, there's obviously probably money involved somewhere, but we're also dealing with a narrative and a history in our country of abortion being on demand for a very long time. So this is now the third generation that we're seeing who just accepts abortion as totally acceptable. So, you have young people graduating and then coming into positions of leadership. And if no one is affecting that generation in some kind of massive way, then all you're going to see is the continual perpetuation of the abortion rhetoric across our country. I mean, you see that greatly with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He graduated from a university campus, McGill. He did social justice work. He was an advocate for various things, and now he's in a position of leadership promoting certain things that are, destroying the fabric of our country, namely free speech.
Now, you had an interesting experience at Carleton University. Why don't you share with our viewers what happened?
Yeah, so, quite a long time ago, 10 years ago, I was running the pro-life club on my own campus, Carleton University. And, we were aimed at bringing the dialogue to campus no matter what. And so we wanted to put on a display that showed people exactly what abortion was. And the student union and our administration really didn't like us. We were sort of infamous on campus because we wouldn't let up in our messaging. And we applied to use this space on campus to put up the display, and the administration had a big problem with that, and so they denied us the ability to use space that everyone else on campus is allowed to use. And so we said to the university, this is discrimination. It's content-based discrimination. We're tuition-paying students, so we have a right to this property, and it's not for universities to decide who gets to talk about what. Universities are meant to be a place where we can explore ideas. And if we want to see Canada remain a democracy, then we have to vehemently and protect our free speech. So they didn't like that very much, and so we said, we're going to do this in protest of the university. So we showed up with our display very peacefully, and they had called the Ottawa City Police to have us arrested, and they handcuffed us and put us in paddy wagons, and then took us to a security building on campus, and then uncuffed us, charged us with trespassing on our own campus, and then told us to go to class.
Oh my goodness.
And so we subsequently filed a lawsuit against the school for their discrimination, but unfortunately we lost because laws, you know, courtrooms are not immune to politics, I would say.
Speaking of politics, how do you feel when leaders say the abortion debate is no longer open? Even the Conservative Party of Canada, the last election, say we're not going to reopen this debate.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly disappointing to see how far removed our politicians are from real life. In our country, a majority of Canadians want to see a restriction on abortion in late term, in the third trimester, and that was recent polling that was released through through Angus. And I think you are buying into a narrative that makes them afraid to have a conversation about abortion. But our philosophy is, as is many other organizations in the movement, people are having abortions, and they're having them to the tune of $100,000 a year. So you're talking about a very serious medical procedure that we've politicized to the point where we can't even talk about it. And that's a problem. That's a health risk to women and children, obviously. There are women who are being trafficked who have abortions. There are women who are in abusive relationships who are being pressured. And we can't effectively help any of them because there's this sort of blanket over the whole thing. So long story short, they're wrong, and the more that they try to say the abortion debate is closed, the more that we'll talk about it.
Ruth, what about the, let's say, husband and wife? Let's say the wife was raped, and the husband and wife say, we don't want to have this rapist's child growing inside of my wife. That's why we're having an abortion. What do you say to a couple like that? And they both agree that they don't want to have this child, they don't want to bring this child to term.
So first and foremost, it's critical that anyone who is aiding someone in this situation is able to speak compassionately to the people who are involved, because there are 3 people involved in this situation: the baby, the mom, and the dad. And in fact, they are now parents, whether they planned to be or not. And even if there was someone else involved, this person's wife, right, she was involved. She's now a mom. And as much as that child is partially the result of a rapist, a very horrible person who's done a horrible thing, they're also partially this woman's got, you know, her DNA, and you know, that should make them valuable to whoever, you know, is involved in the situation, even if they came from a difficult circumstance.
So it's not the baby's fault, right?
It's not the baby's fault.
So maybe just give the baby up for adoption. Maybe bring the baby to term.
Yeah, you know, ultimately abortion is not an eraser. And abortion cannot unrape a rape victim. And so what we say to women is that you're looking at perhaps adding trauma in an already very traumatic situation. There have been many women who've had abortions who say it felt like being raped again because the procedure is very intrusive. And not to say that it won't be extremely difficult, but if we had a woman who had been raped and she decided to keep her child, and then a year later this child starts to look like the rapist, we would not set up a clinic to allow her to go and end the life of that child because that child has the DNA of this rapist as well and looks like this rapist.
What do you say to women, though, Ruth, that say, this is my body, you have no right to tell me what to do with my own body?
Yeah, so what we often say is we ask a lot of questions. So we would predominantly ask first, is there one body or 2 bodies? When you're pregnant, how many bodies are there? And, you know, if you're pregnant, you know, do you have 4 arms and 4 legs? Obviously not. You're not, you know, a hermaphrodite. You're carrying someone else's body. And in our species, this is how people procreate. So it's not just your body. And so from a human rights perspective, you need to weigh the rights of both individuals, just like you would in any other situation between 2 born people. My rights end as soon as I'm going to harm you, and both are considered equal. So similarly, we need to look at the child's rights and the rights of the mom as equal. And in that way, abortion is nothing more than age discrimination, because they're younger more vulnerable human beings, and for that reason, their rights are discounted.
How did we reach this point, Ruth, that Canada became a country with no restrictions on abortion? I mean, even liberal nations like France and Sweden have gestational restrictions.
Yeah, it's a good question. So again, from my perspective, it's a historical narrative that's been passed down now generation to generation, and the result of abortion is very hidden from the public. You know, you could go, if you're not in some specific field, you could go years without knowing where the abortion clinic is in your city, or that abortions are even happening, or what is abortion at all. People have this very vague concept about what abortion is. And so for that reason, it's easy to build marketing and a narrative around something that people don't really understand. So, you know, in our work, we try extremely hard to bring the reality and the truth of abortion to young people and really get them to challenge their own preconceived notions when it comes to abortion, because most of it is just absolutely crazy. Like, we have ultrasound machines and a very clear picture and way to determine when human life begins based on science, logic, and imagery, and yet somehow this narrative has remained intact.
Has that ultrasound maybe changed women's perceptions or opinions about getting an abortion once they actually see their child inside of their bodies?
Many, especially in the States where there are fewer regulations in being able to have ultrasound technology in crisis pregnancy care centers or outside abortion clinics. Like, I know an organization that has set one up in a bus, and then as women are heading to the clinic, they ask them like, hey, why don't you just get checked first? And then they're able to convince them to have an ultrasound, and it's had an incredible ability to change women's minds. And I know so many stories like that where once they actually are able to see either what an abortion is or the ultrasound image of their own child and their own offspring, their minds change.
You know what's interesting too, Ruth, is that recent studies have shown that Canadians, though the majority of Canadians are pro-choice, they're actually against gender-selective abortions.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a bit of a difficulty if you are pro-choice, which is, you know, based on the narrative of women's rights, and yet you promote and support the killing of young women in the womb. You can't have it both ways. Although on university campuses, we have met pro-choice people who justify gender selection under women's rights and choices, and to which we often ask, so women should have the right to kill other women if it's for their own empowerment. You can't have it both ways. So I think pro-choice people who are more reasonable do see that there's a problem with using abortion to kill women. And we're, you know, in China and India, this is certainly proven to be a problem. It's nothing more than dehumanization. And, you know, similarly, there are a lot of pro-choice people who I think would oppose late-term abortion, at least from our experience on campus, and certainly the polling suggests that most reasonable people can see, okay, like if she's in crisis at first, you know, or, you know, having those conversations, but once the baby's viable, all those arguments fall apart. Not that they were very good to begin with, but they become far less understandable.
Sometimes people as well, Ruth, they want to have an abortion when they find out that their child maybe has Down syndrome. You know, there's some real physical challenges with this child. What do you say to that couple?
Well, again, you know, what we've typically said is, would you have the same mentality with a born child who has disabilities? Now, problematically in our country, some people probably would say, you know, end their life as well. So what we try to do is explain value, and we explain that, you know, there are varying, you know, just variables or characteristics that change through the course of your life. And we need to eliminate suffering and not sufferers. And frankly, people with Down syndrome are some of the happiest people that I have ever met, and they bring so much joy and color to our world. And if the left truly wants to be diverse and, you know, identity politics and really value people based on who they really are, then certainly this hypocrisy around abortion when it comes to disabilities is just absolutely ridiculous and needs to change.
I know a couple in Edmonton, they had to wait 3 years to adopt because there was a shortage of babies.
Wow.
So doesn't that make sense then to have the babies, to bring them to term, eliminate abortion, and then bless these families that want to have children and adopt kids?
Yeah, it's a very
have the opportunity, right?
Yeah, very interesting that many people who support abortion are also against adoption, and they say, well, you're going to have a child out there. How traumatic is that? Well, I mean, abortion is extremely traumatic to go through, yet we don't talk about it as a trauma, which adds another trauma to that situation. But yes, you know, I myself was adopted as a baby from India, and I think that, you know, people would be blessed to adopt, and certainly there are more couples waiting to adopt children than there are children in Canada.
Ruth Shaw, Executive Director of National Campus Life Network out of Ottawa. Thanks for joining us here in studio today.
Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.